But I start tonight with the despicable dictator Vladimir Putin and his interview with former Fox News host and Russian apologist Tucker Carlson. The controversy over the interview has highlighted something that's been troubling me deeply. This isolationist movement in the Republican Party that argues America should not be involved in foreign wars. The President of the United States is considered the leader of the free world for a reason. America plays a critical role in global security. Dangerous dictators think twice about aggressive conduct because of the threat of retribution from the US. Well, at least they do when there's a stronger president than the feeble Joe Biden. What's to stop China from not just invading Taiwan, but going further into the Pacific and even Australia? We know full well that our lacklustre defence capability means that Australia can't defend itself should China choose to attack. The main deterrent, the threat of retaliation from America. Likewise, what prevents Putin from his ambition of expansion in Eastern Europe? It's the knowledge that the US could intervene. And it's the same with Iran and Israel. Yet there's an isolationist push among sections of the Republican Party for the United States to stay out of foreign wars. They call this an American first attitude. They even claim it's patriotic. But in effect, this attitude can only damage democracy and global security. Now, before I rip into Tucker Carlson, let me point out that I've been a guest on his Fox News show when he had it many times, and he even launched my Wuhan book. I have no animosity towards MAGA figures. I've interviewed Trump himself, and Steve Bannon was on my show just last night. Now, Republicans like Tucker Carlson argue that America should stop funding weapons in Ukraine. But if Ukraine falls, and if Putin moves on to Poland and the Baltic states, which are NATO members, that would trigger Article 5 of the NATO agreement, which compels members to come to their aid. That would mean America would be drawn into a direct war with Russia, where a madman has access to nuclear weapons. It would be far more costly than simply sending weapons to Ukraine, and it could turn into World War III. Arming Ukraine right now and allowing it to defend itself quarantines the conflict. So even if you only care about your backyard and you don't care at all what happens to Ukrainians, as one foreign policy expert said to me today, it's insanity to risk a much wider war. Yet Tucker Carlson has been arguing for some time that we shouldn't be involved in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And, by the way, he doesn't care about helping out Israel either. Carlson is tapping into a deep-seated isolationist sentiment in the American public. An anti-Ukraine attitude has been simmering in the US for a while, but it surfaced strongly this week with news of Carlson's interview with Putin. Even without the Fox News platform, Carlson still has extensive reach. His tweet from Moscow has had some 92 million views, if you believe the Twitter metrics, which many argue are exaggerated. But more critically, he plays an influential role as a thought leader within the Republican Party. And by the way, Tucker has ambitions to be president one day. I'm told his father even has a Tucker 24 mug. So this interview with Putin, well, is it coincidental timing when the bill for $60 billion in funding for Ukraine is due for a vote in the US Senate on Thursday? Or is it a coincidence at all? It would be Putin, not Tucker, calling the shots of if and when the interview happens. Two sources connected to the national security community told me today that Tucker is now viewed as bought by Russia. Tucker Carlson, this is one source, one national security community source told me that Tucker Carlson is a willing agent of the Russian government and is spreading Russian government talking points. He's a tool of Putin's and is playing into Putin's hands. Now, I asked this source what proof there was for this, and they said to me, and I quote, it is theoretically possible there's no financial relationship or actual benefits between Carlson and the Russian government, and all he's doing is cynically tapping into an audience. That's possible. But no question he's facilitating Russia's arguments. He's the main channel for their arguments into the United States. In other words, a propaganda tool for Russia. Now, ironically, Tucker has accused journalists who've interviewed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky of government propaganda.
But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda.
Elon Musk on Twitter, or X, accused journalists who've interviewed Zelensky of sucking up to him. And he used quite crass language. The journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote, "Who were the American journalists who conducted even minimally adversarial interviews with Zelensky?" And Elon Musk replied, "To be fair, it's hard for them to talk while giving and you can read the term in the script, I'm not going to be crass, at the same time." Now, firstly, Zelensky has done interviews with journalists in major countries around the world. But secondly, Ukraine is the victim here. Russia invaded Ukraine, and Zelensky is simply fighting for his people, fighting for the autonomous survival of his country, free from the control of a communist dictatorship where freedom of speech is suppressed, political rivals are poisoned, and journalists are killed for negative coverage. It's twisting the truth when Tucker criticises media organisations for not bothering to interview Putin, as he puts it.
Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin.
Of course, every media organisation tries repeatedly to interview Putin. I've put in requests to the Russian embassy for years. But the Russian dictator, who does not believe in press freedom, is hardly going to sit down with a Western journalist unless he's confident he won't get a tough time and that they're on his team. The Kremlin admitted as much in a statement. And if you don't believe me, think about this. More journalists are murdered in Russia than in any other part of the world. As you know, an American journalist from the Wall Street Journal, Evan Gershkovich, is currently behind bars in Russia. Now, of course, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with a tough journalist interviewing a murderous dictator as long as hard questions are asked, as long as they're not doing their bidding and spreading their propaganda. But another former Fox News host, Megyn Kelly, told Paul Murray last night that Carlson doesn't have a history of tough commentary on Russia.
Part of the reason they're skeptical of Tucker is he has not been hard on Russia in his coverage of this conflict. He's been, if anything, defensive of them. And so I think people are expecting him to do a very flattering softball interview that will further the narrative that people feel they've heard from Tucker. If he's not tough, if he doesn't ask him tough questions, he'll be excoriated, rightfully so.
Where this all leads us is that it's deeply concerning that powerful figures like Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson can't distinguish between allies and enemies, between values of freedom that we've fought for over generations and values of tyranny and totalitarianism. Do they do it for clicks, for money, for fame? Whatever the motivation, it empowers our enemies at a time when we're already seeing a new fragility in social cohesion and global security is precarious. We can't take our freedom and our democratic values for granted. We need to protect and guard them, not allow them to be whisked away for the sake of likes on social media. The consequences are too serious. The last thing we want is to be sending our sons and daughters off to risk their lives or to an early grave in order to regain democratic values that our fathers and grandfathers have already fought for and even sacrificed their lives for. This isn't simply a matter of Ukraine. This is stopping the advance of Russia and the axis of evil, Iran, China, and North Korea. This is defending our very existence and our way of life to give our children a better future, rather than a repeat of the wars of the past.